There has been a lot of hand-wringing this week about BYU's treatment by the College Football Playoff Committee, and for good reason. But the simple fact of the matter for BYU is that they have to beat Cincinnati, or it's all for naught.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Proud to be part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is America's #1 sports podcast network. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider as your host here on this podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Coming up on today's show, we are going to talk about BYU football and why it is so important that the Cougars ignore essentially all of us on the outside and focus on beating Cincinnati and why it impacts college football playoff, everything else that's going on around the Cougars right now. Then we're going to get into an update on Kennard Davis Jr.'s situation when it comes to his arrest on suspicion of DUI by the Provo Police Department. We have some details on what ultimately transpired, and we also have a statement from BYU as to what the immediate future for Moo Davis is. We'll get into that, and then we'll finish up today's show with a preview of BYU's next basketball game tomorrow afternoon, in fact, against the Wisconsin Badgers in a rematch of their NCAA tournament game earlier this year. All right, so by the way, all this today brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com today, place your first $5 bet if you're a new customer, and get up to $300 in bonus bets, courtesy of your friends over at FanDuel. All right, so BYU obviously would like to be in a position where they were in contention for a college football playoff berth at large at minimum. Now, in theory, they are just that, sitting at 11 in those rankings. They need to move up a spot or two to really feel secure in that. And if they keep winning, there's a reason to think that there can be some chaos in front of them that ultimately could get them into that position. But all of the talk, all the chatter, I've been doing it myself on social media about the fact that we've got Brett Yormark out saying there, we would like to, we want to earn it on the field. That was the quote from Brett Yormark in the immediate aftermath of this week's college football playoff rankings. And I tagged it and said, well, you can't win it on the field if you can't get into the field. Speaking of the college football playoff field. It sure feels like the playoff committee, at least from my vantage point, is trying to put an artificial glass ceiling on BYU and Utah when it comes to getting multiple Big 12 teams into the playoff field. It feels like more and more, and I'd be happy to be wrong on this, that BYU probably needs to win out, and that includes a win in the Big 12 title game, thereby clinching the automatic bid into the playoff field, and then Texas Tech by the standings would likely get an at-large bid. That feels like the most secure and most ready way for the Big 12 to get multiple teams into this field. Is that going to happen? Well, it's a whole lot harder to say that BYU is going to be able to run the table here because Texas Tech is a formidable opponent. We all saw that just a couple of weeks ago down there in Lubbock. I do believe BYU would fare better on a neutral field against the Red Raiders, but that's down the line. The only thing BYU can do, and something that Kalani Sitake harped upon over and over again in his weekly press conference earlier this week, and I completely understand why, is because if BYU goes out and loses to Cincinnati this week, then everything that yours truly, yourself, or anybody else has been crowing about when it comes to the college football playoff committee, yeah, we can essentially look like we're going to have a bunch of egg on our face, because that gives the college football playoff committee the, see, we told you. That is what BYU is trying to avoid. And I appreciate the fact that Kalani and others, Aaron Roderick, Jay Hill, etc., have been very quick to say, we're focused on this. It's a one-game season. And that's the right mentality, and the mentality BYU has to have at this juncture. They know how quickly it frittered away a season ago. They lost to Kansas, and that was a crazy, crazy outcome, and they allowed it to linger in to the performance against Arizona State. Had they won either one of those games, BYU very well is playing in Arlington against Arizona State, and very well could have found themselves playing in the college football playoff a season ago. But by virtue of their back-to-back losses, they lost out on control of their fate and ultimately lost out on going to Arlington, Texas. They have been absolutely intent on making sure that that is not the case this year. And I thought the performance against TCU told us a lot about the mindset, the makeup, the overall gumption of this BYU football program, and I expect that's going to carry over into this week against Cincinnati. Cincinnati is not nearly as formidable as some, I thought myself, probably made them out to be at different points, entering what Aaron Roderick once called the toughest six-game stretch in BYU football history. That was all the way back ahead of BYU's game against Arizona. So far, BYU in that toughest stretch ever is 4-1. If they can go 5-1 and with some combination of some other results this weekend, they could clinch a berth in Arlington as soon as this weekend. Now you have to have some other things play out around that, but it feels like this game is for all the marbles when it comes to controlling your postseason fate for BYU. You will probably have to bust down the door of the College Football Playoff Committee and force your way into that field, it feels like, because that's just my personal perception, is that they're trying to put a glass ceiling on this and trying to force essentially 5 SEC teams, 3 Big Ten teams, 1 Big 12, 1 Notre Dame, 1 ACC, and then 1 G6 team. That's the way it feels right now. Could circumstances play out, results of other games play out where that changes? Absolutely. But as it stands right now, BYU has to focus on Cincinnati winning that game, because if they go out and lose it, get ready. It's going to be the College Football Playoff Committee dropping BYU like a stone like they did a season ago. And very easily, the Cougars lose control of what their postseason fate is when it comes to the Big 12 title game. It's not saying that they couldn't still end up in Arlington with 2 conference losses, but it gets a whole lot more messed up considering you have Utah, ASU, Houston, and Cincinnati all sitting on 2 conference losses right now. You want to stay above that. I have said it time and time and time again. Win and you are in. And I think that's the perfect mentality for BYU to continue to carry with them. I think Cincinnati is imminently beatable, and we'll talk more about this on tomorrow's podcast because our Friday editions are more when I get into the weeds, as it were, when it comes to what I think is edge for BYU in a game like that. But I think that the mentality the football program itself has, they need to essentially shutter everything else and kind of just say, hey, the outside noise is great, and we appreciate the fact that people like a Dave Portnoy or Shahan Jayaraja are stumping for us on the outside. But we cannot afford to drop the ball now, both literally and figuratively, and then see our people that want to see us fail have the upper hand in that circumstance. So whole focus right now for BYU, focus on the Cincinnati Bearcats getting a W. And then I think after the Cincinnati game, there may be a little more outcry in terms of the treatment of BYU, more so than already is. And I think it's far more justified at that point. All right, coming up next, we're going to flip over to basketball. Kennard Davis Jr. was cited and ultimately has retained an attorney now with regards to his arrest on suspicion of DUI. What is the latest there? What does it mean for the BYU basketball program? Well, we have comments from Kevin Young on the whole situation, including an update on Keba Keita as well, heading into this Wisconsin matchup on Friday. We'll get into all that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if it's the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything, who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks, and as I often say, everything, it feels like, in between. And even if it's not basketball you're into, they got football, baseball, it feels like every sport under the sun. They've got options for you guys. Plus, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout along the way. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up to play your game with FanDuel, as they are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network America's #1 sports podcast network. Thank you to all of you who continue to subscribe, rate, and review, like the show on YouTube, do everything you do, comment. I appreciate any and all what you guys do to help us continue to build Locked On Cougars and to truly the #1 BYU podcast. I have no problem saying that at this juncture, so I appreciate all of your support. All right, so Kennard Davis Jr. obviously is a topic that many people are paying very close attention to, because when it involves the law, when it involves allegedly marijuana, there's a whole litany of things that go into this circumstance. But here are the facts. The latest we know about the Kennard Davis situation is that he has been cited for DUI, and it involves marijuana and field sobriety tests, drug evaluations on the scene of a car accident last week as Kennard Davis Jr. was headed to meet up with the team to fly out to Boston ahead of their game against UConn. The situation at hand here is that there is still not a full accident report available. Jay Drew from the Deseret News said they've requested the accident report from that crash, but the Provo Police Department denied the Grandma request, saying, quote, "It is not able to divulge any further additional information until the Provo City Attorney's Office has completed their proceedings," unquote. Does that mean that more charges could be coming in this case? Maybe so. Maybe they're still just continuing to make sure they have everything tied up and everything's been taken care of. But the situation at hand is that BYU, speaking of Brigham Young University itself, has taken point on the Kennard Davis situation. Kevin Young spoke to the media yesterday, and he was asked about the Kennard Davis situation. And here is what his response was, and why he probably will not be commenting much more on Kennard Davis's situation going forward. Here you go.
Obviously, I know exactly what happened, very aware of all the details, but at the same time, I'm going to let the school handle it the way that they've asked me to handle it, and that's for them to be the people that talk about it. If there's a forum where I'm opened up to speak on it, I will, but I think to this point, they've said what they've said.
Safe to assume that he won't play Friday?
I think it's safe, but I also think there's a lot of stuff still being sorted out.
There you go, Kevin Young talking about the Kennard Davis situation, and I completely understand why he has been told by main campus, essentially, we're going to run point on this. They want to make sure that the messaging and everything is handled the way that they want to handle it. But as Jay Drew also he got a statement from BYU Athletics. Their spokesperson said this, quote, "Kennard Davis has been suspended for violation of team rules. The length of the suspension is still to be determined," unquote. So that goes right in line with what Kevin Young said both before and after the UConn game, that it was an indefinite suspension. There were some people out there who wanted to quibble saying he's not been suspended. Well, there you go. He has been suspended, everybody. That is clear as day now. But the situation at hand here is Kevin Young obviously is going to come under some scrutiny, and for good reason, because when you bring guys in from outside of what BYU traditionally is recruited to, when stuff like this pops up, it inevitably lends itself to questions about character, all kinds of different things when it comes to these athletes. But Kevin Young addressed exactly what his philosophy is on communicating with his players and the like, and I thought he had a very, very insightful answer as to what he essentially tells his guys about what BYU is all about when it comes to the honor code and such situations. Here's Kevin's response yesterday to the media.
Do the right thing, and if you don't, there's consequences, based on our own internal team rules as well as rules of the university. So, there's nuances to that's obviously a deep question, but that's just my general philosophy of just trying to get these guys to do the right thing. And at the same time, if there's ever a situation that comes up where that's not the case, then we handle it appropriately, and that's my philosophy.
Straightforward, to the point, but also I think it has some nuance there as well from Kevin Young that I can appreciate. He knows what BYU stands for, and Kevin's not hiding it from athletes. He wouldn't have taken the job at BYU if he thought he was going to go over there and kind of wink and a nod and say, hey, this honor code thing, don't worry about it. No, BYU is deadly serious about the honor code, and I think this Kennard Davis situation is just kind of the latest in terms of how they'll handle it. Who knows how long Kennard Davis will sit out, but Kevin was pretty clear that from what you heard earlier, that Kennard's going to be out against Wisconsin and probably out a while longer. TBD on the length, as BYU's statement read to the Deseret News, and we'll see what all happens there. But I can appreciate the fact that BYU, I think, has changed a little bit. I'm not trying to say that they made wholesale changes, but consider the circumstances. I know it's apples to oranges in so many different ways. Consider the circumstances that Jake Retzloff found himself in at BYU. Precedent for Jake Retzloff's situation from years prior to this was either you withdraw from school or BYU expels you from school. Well, BYU found it fit in their mind to offer some mercy and some leniency in offering him a 7-game suspension. That is the first time to my knowledge that it had ever been that way. I think in eras past at BYU, from my personal opinion, this is not me speaking for BYU. Let me be very clear about that when I say this. I thought Kennard Davis would have been essentially the same situation where he either is told he needs to withdraw from school for a time or they expel him from school. I do think there will be a suspension of some variety. And I talked about it earlier this week that they have said that honor code behavior is tied into revenue share. And BYU's basketball players, trust me, they're getting revenue share money from Brigham Young University. Thereby, you can assume that Kennard Davis Jr. is probably going to face a hit in the pocketbook when it comes to his revenue share allotment from BYU because of him running afoul of the honor code and also an illegal situation now with the Provo Police Department. So I appreciate the way that BYU is handling this. I do think that they are going to try and show as much leniency, as much mercy as they possibly can. And it is my sincere hope also that Kennard Davis Jr., as well as the rest of the BYU basketball program, learns and grows from this situation. I fully believe that everybody involved in this has a good understanding of what they're going to be facing here. Speaking of Kennard and how long he'll have to sit out and the like, but you hope in the end it's a positive outcome for all parties and nobody feels like they've been slighted, they have been hard done, any of that. And I appreciate the way that BYU has approached this, and I think it's the right way to have approached it, but I'm just an analyst sitting in my studio talking about it. But that's the latest on Kennard Davis's situation, and I would assume, just reading between the lines on my end of things, you're going to see him sit out for an indefinite period. It's not just going to be a 1-game suspension. If that's the case, okay, that's great. That's going to help BYU because Kennard, he is a critical piece of BYU's lineup, but I would expect he's going to be held out for a little while, an indefinite period, but we'll see what the school decides to do moving forward. Now, BYU has to move forward because they got a huge game tomorrow against 23rd ranked Wisconsin. It's a rematch of their NCAA tournament game, which was an absolute classic. It felt like, I thought it was, and it's rematching in the Delta Center tomorrow afternoon, 2:00 Mountain Time tip. What to expect from the Badgers and the Cougars as they square off inside the home of the Utah Jazz. We'll get into that next, as well as getting an update from Kevin Young on Keba Keita's situation and status coming up next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Woodward. We're just going to say it. The fun per foot ratio with our friends at Woodward Park City is second to none. Located just 20 minutes away from the Salt Lake Valley, Woodward offers experiential learning in a radically fun and safe environment. The best part is with facilities for all abilities, the door is always open to first-timers and regulars alike. Bounce from park to pits, ramps to tramps, and back again. And what that means is snowboarding, skateboarding, anything action sports, Woodward has got the options for you guys. Anything you want to do, they've got it. Mountain Park season passes are now on sale for just $499. Rip hot laps with a posse after school and into the evening. Maximize mountain time at one of the best terrain parks in Utah all season long. And if you're looking to go all in, they have all access memberships providing just that, from passes to perks, discounts, and more as well. Just starting out, learn to fly with the Woodward Tribe and its seasonal and multi-week programs that build your skills and confidence in a Stoke-inspiring environment. And just 20 minutes away from Salt Lake, once again, Woodward offers that experiential learning with facilities for all abilities. Learn more today by going to woodwardparkcity.com. Once again, that's woodwardparkcity.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not signed up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, another plug for you guys to do just that. Get the inside intel that you crave about BYU football and basketball. Come on your phone in the form of a text message. And on the flip side, support the podcast in a different way. Just $5 a month to be a part of the Insider Group, and you get a 14-day free trial before you're charged a single penny. If you want to sign up today, click on the link in the show notes below or reach out to us via social media or email, and we'll get you squared away as members of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right. So BYU basketball is going to be taking on the Wisconsin Badgers. And any of you who recall that absolutely epic clash in the NCAA tournament are probably looking forward to this matchup. Now, The faces are different for Wisconsin and for BYU, but both of these programs are still competing at a very, very high level. Wisconsin currently ranked 23rd in the country as compared to number 9 for BYU. Wisconsin is off to a 4-0 start, but they have not played anywhere near the level of competition, at least in the regular season, that BYU's played. They've played the Campbell Camels, the Northern Illinois Salukis, Ball State Cardinals, and SIUE, which I think is like Southern Illinois University Edwardsville. I think I got that one right. Those are the 4 opponents they have played, and they have blown the doors off every single one of these teams. They're averaging better than 90 points per game. This is going to be their first big test inside the Delta Center tomorrow afternoon. 2:00 Mountain Time tip. Originally, it was supposed to be like a 6 or 7 o'clock Mountain Time tip because the NBA was supposed to, not schedule a Jazz game this on the Friday evening, but they scheduled the Oklahoma City Thunder to come to town, necessitating a change in tip time for BYU. The other issue with this is, I'm just going to say it right now. Based on the numbers I have seen in terms of prices on tickets, I saw $94 for upper bowl tickets at the Delta Center for a 2:00 tip on a Friday afternoon. And also this game being broadcast on Peacock. It's not on broadcast television. It's on Peacock, a streaming service, obviously affiliated with NBC and the Big Ten Network. I will say this may be the lowest attended and lowest watched game of BYU's basketball season. I'm talking all year long, including ESPN Plus games and the like. I don't see the combination of ticket prices. Like I said, $94 for upper bowl seats. I think north of $200 for the lower bowl. Yeah, there are going to be some absolute diehard Cougar fans who are going to show. I have no doubt about that. But I'm telling you, I saw the ticket prices for North Carolina. I saw a lot of the complaints you guys had on social media, the questions you guys submitted to me, and I didn't have a good answer for you guys as to why the ticket prices were as high as they are. I still don't have a good answer why they're high here for Wisconsin. Is it due to the Delta Center setting the prices? I'd have a hard time believing that, considering the guy who kind of owns the facility is one of the biggest BYU boosters out there, and Ryan Smith. I wonder if it's just there's a third party or something like that setting the prices and completely missing the mark. So I'll just get that out of the way. I don't understand it for the life of me. I really do think the combination of ticket prices and the fact that it's being broadcast streaming only on Peacock, it literally might be the lowest attended and lowest in terms of overall eyeballs watched game all season for BYU basketball. And that's unfortunate because it's a top 25 showdown. It should be a great game, and I'm looking forward to it because Wisconsin and BYU, they played an absolutely incredible game. John Tonje, Yegor Demon, just the who's who, it felt like on both sides of that game in March was absolutely epic. And I'm hoping that we get the same type of a deal here as BYU and Wisconsin square off again, but we'll see how it all shakes out. The funny thing about this is I said that Wisconsin's ranked 23rd in the AP poll. If you go by KenPom ratings, which I am a big fan of Ken Pomeroy, that's my personal, I guess, statistical analyst of choice that I prefer to go to. He actually has BYU and Wisconsin pretty close to one another. At one point, they were actually one spot away from each other, but I'm seeing this as I record this podcast, that Wisconsin is currently 15th at KenPom.com, whereas BYU is 17th at KenPom.com, with the Texas Tech Red Raiders at 16. I think that changed since I last saw it, because I think it was 15 or 16 or 16, 17, where they were literally right next to one another in the KenPom.com ratings. This should lend itself to a pretty darn good game. If you go by KenPom's analytics, it gives BYU a 57% chance to win against Wisconsin, obviously playing in Utah, albeit not at home. Technically for BYU, it's in the Delta Center. It's a neutral court, but should be the majority of the fans, whoever does show up, should be BYU fans. And I'm looking forward to this. Wisconsin, as I mentioned, has got a kind of a new look this year, much like BYU does with AJ DeBonsa and Richie Saunders and Rob Wright III. But the one thing I can tell you guys is that Wisconsin, much like UConn, very long and wants to play a very physical brand of football. John Blackwell is back from last season. He was a really, really phenomenal guard that kind of comboed with John Tonje and really made fits for BYU. But you look at their roster, 7 foot, 6'10", 6'10", 6'9", 7 foot, 6'10". They got, and by the way, they're guards. I don't think you see a guard listed shorter than 6'3". Like Greg Gard, I think is who their head coach still is, if I'm not mistaken, has a really, really long, rangy lineup, and it's going to test BYU. And the problem is BYU is going to be without, it looks like, their front court stalwart and Keba Keita. So Kevin Young was asked about Keita's status, and I thought he gave a fairly positive assessment of where things stand for Keita, but it sure sounds like we're going to probably be without speaking of BYU, they are probably going to be without Keita in tomorrow night's game based on these comments that he gave to the media yesterday.
He's trending in the right direction. Obviously anything that deals with medical, whatever the medical people say, I do. I feel I've gotten good feedback in terms of he is doing better, but at the same time, he's currently still out. So it's more positive than it's not, but the situation that he's in is more of a day-to-day type thing.
I am glad to hear it's trending in a positive direction for Keita, but I'd be hard-pressed to think that if he were to be cleared today, does he get enough court time to feel like, okay, I'm ready to go out there and play? That would be hard for me to believe that he's going to be ready to go that quickly for Kevin Young and company. So it feels like it's going to be probably more small ball lineup where BYU plays Hadim Boop at the 5 spot and probably switches 1 through 5 and tries to counter the size of Wisconsin with their speed and athleticism. It is going to be critical for BYU to be able to hit outside shots in this game, much like it was when they squared off against the Badgers back in March. BYU really has only had two decent. I'd say the second half against UConn was a decent half shooting the football. The only real good half shooting the basketball from 3, the really good half was the one against Delaware in the second half. They need to find a way to shoot the ball consistently for 40 minutes. And if they can do that, that will give them a fighting chance without 2 of their regulars, speaking of Keba Keita and Moo Davis, in the lineup for BYU. It's going to be a little makeshift here. And it wouldn't surprise me that they put Mihailo Boskovic maybe back in the starting lineup to counter the size of Wisconsin, hopefully offer more than he offered against UConn, especially when it comes to rebounding the basketball. I think a guy like Boskovic needs to be a little more judicious in terms of his shot selection. That's personal opinion on the matter, but they're going to have to kind of make do with what they've got. And that's going to be incumbent upon, like I said, Boskovic, Neiman Boop, also Xavier Staten. He's got to stay out of foul trouble. He's got to show he's capable of holding up against the other bigs from Wisconsin in this game. And let's be very blunt. The big 3, speaking of AJ DeBonsa, Richie Saunders, and Rob Wright, they're going to have to lead the way here for BYU. They have got to score 60-plus points probably between the 3 of them for BYU to win this basketball game. I've got no problem saying that. And quite frankly, I think that big 3, if they score 60 points a game the rest of the season, BYU will be in a good spot because it's essentially making it a pick-your-poison situation where, okay, you can slow down this guy, but you can't slow down him. You can't slow down. You have those 3. If they're rocking and rolling, BYU is going to be literally in every game. Now, if maybe 2 of the 3 have an off night, that'll be the question. Can BYU survive a matchup like that? We haven't seen that yet, and hopefully we don't see it for some time. But we'll see how it all shakes out. Another big game here against the Wisconsin Badgers. And I, for one, am very eager to see how it all goes down and see how BYU competes. I do think that what we saw against UConn taught us a lot about the gumption, the tenacity, and the overall grit that BYU basketball has. I think we'll get another iteration of that, hopefully, in this Wisconsin matchup, and hopefully they come out with a W. All right, that is going to do it for today's edition of the show. Hope you guys are all doing fantastic out there, and as always, thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. Make your second listen today our friends over the Locked On Big 12 podcast. That's Drake Toll. Drake is absolutely killing it, talking all things BYU, Big 12, and everything else in between. Even talks some national stuff as well, but check out that podcast. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, just like this one. So as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and come back tomorrow and be an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.